Celeste Armand was in the final hours of labor when her billionaire husband, Dorian Calvert, slipped into a five-star hotel suite with his mistress. While she brought new life into the world, he was busy living a double one. What unfolded next wasn't just a marriage collapsing. It was the unraveling of a carefully hidden empire of secrets, betrayal, and a woman's quiet plan for ultimate revenge. Celeste Marrow lived in a world many envied, but few truly understood. From the outside, her life was flawless. A sprawling glass mansion nestled in the hills of Eldersgate, a private chef, designer gowns, luxury cars, and a husband whose name often appeared on the covers of financial magazines. Dorian Vale, the tech visionary behind a multi-billion-dollar artificial intelligence firm, had built an empire from scratch and captured headlines with his bold ideas and even bolder lifestyle. The two were often seen at galas, charity events, and award shows, seemingly inseparable, the kind of couple that others looked up to. But perfection often wears a mask. Celeste was 8 months pregnant, her body heavy with the new life inside her, when the strange feeling started creeping in, an unshakable sense that something was wrong. Dorian had become distant in recent weeks. He started coming home late, sometimes not at all, claiming last-minute meetings or international calls that couldn't be rescheduled. His hugs felt more like obligations than expressions of love. His eyes, once warm and curious, had grown unreadable. Celeste chalked it up to stress. His company was preparing to launch a new AI platform, and the pressure must have been enormous. But in the quiet of their king-sized bed, with her hand on her belly and Dorian's side of the bed cold, doubts bloomed like dark petals in her mind. She didn't want to be the kind of woman who checked her husband's phone. Celeste valued trust. It was something her mother, a quiet schoolteacher from Rosemere, had instilled in her since childhood. Still, one morning, curiosity edged its way past her morals. Dorian had left for a jog and, unusually, forgot his phone on the nightstand. Her fingers hesitated above the screen, her heart pounding. One swipe to unlock. Nothing unusual at first. Emails, corporate messages, calendar alerts. But then, in a hidden photo album labeled with an innocuous letter T, she found something that made her stomach turn. A mirror selfie of Dorian shirtless, champagne in hand. The timestamp matched a night he claimed to be in Berlin for meetings. The background was clearly not a hotel conference room. Celeste shut the phone and placed it exactly as she'd found it. She stared at the wall for a long time, trying to suppress the waves of nausea that rose in her throat. Not from the pregnancy this time, but from betrayal. She wanted to scream, to confront him, to demand answers. But something told her to wait, to listen, to observe. Her instincts, dulled for months by baby showers and nursery decorations, roared to life. The following days were a blur. Dorian resumed his usual pattern, vanishing for hours without explanation, smiling too broadly when he returned, and offering vague reassurances that she never asked for. He'd bring her small gifts, flowers, scented candles, baby clothes, as if he were trying to soothe a guilt he didn't want to admit. She played along, her face calm, her tone sweet. But every gesture now felt like a performance. Celeste began noticing new details. How Dorian always kept his phone screen facing down. How he'd lock himself in his home office and speak in low, clipped tones. How he flinched when she walked into the room unexpectedly. It was during one of those nights that the final piece fell into place. Dorian was showering late, something he never used to do, and his phone vibrated on the counter. Celeste didn't touch it, not this time. She simply glanced. A name flashed across the screen. Tasha Drew. The message preview was cut off, but it was enough. That name had never come up before. She wasn't a colleague, not someone from his usual circles. Celeste repeated the name in her head until it etched itself into her memory. She began digging quietly. On social media, Tasha Drew's profile was sleek and curated, filled with sunset yacht rides, luxury apartments, and vague motivational captions. There were no photos with Dorian, nothing obvious, but the timeline matched. Several of her check-ins overlapped with Dorian's business trips. There was one from the Meridian Grand Rooftop Lounge, taken the night Celeste had her second ultrasound alone because Dorian had to attend an urgent strategy meeting. Celeste's heart hardened with every discovery. Still, she told no one. Her mother would be devastated, her friends too eager to judge. Even her therapist might urge forgiveness, suggest it was just a rough patch. But Celeste wasn't interested in repair. She was interested in truth. And now, she wanted to know how deep the betrayal went, how long her husband had been living a double life while she carried his child and built their home. She decided to document everything, from receipts to calendar overlaps, from social media breadcrumbs to casual lies. She knew something bigger was coming. She didn't know what yet, but her instincts told her this wasn't just about cheating. There was more beneath the surface. As her due date approached, Celeste felt her strength rising like a tide. Whatever happened next, she would be ready. Celeste awoke in the early hours of the morning to a sharp, twisting pain in her abdomen. At first, she thought it was a cramp. Then came the second wave, stronger, deeper, unmistakable. Her water had broken. She was alone in the bedroom, the sheets slightly damp from sweat and anxiety. She reached over to Dorian's side of the bed, only to find it cold and untouched. The clock read 3:11 a.m. She grabbed her phone, her hands trembling, and called Dorian. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. A third time. Straight to voicemail. The pain intensified and panic set in. They had practiced this moment, had a plan. Dorian had promised he'd drop everything when it happened. But now, in her moment of need, he was nowhere. Celeste called her neighbor, a kind retired nurse named Evelyn, who lived 2 houses down. Within minutes, Evelyn arrived and rushed her to Eldersgate Medical Center. The contractions were close, and the baby's heartbeat was elevated. Nurses hurried her through admissions and prepped her for delivery. Every face around her was moving quickly, checking vitals, offering comfort. Yet, her mind focused on one thought. Where was Dorian? Between the pain and the beeping monitors, Celeste kept checking her phone. Nothing. No message. No missed call. Hours passed. The nurses kept asking if they should call the father again. She nodded, lips tight. Still no answer. She stopped trying. By the time she was wheeled into the delivery room, exhaustion had taken over. The delivery wasn't easy. Complications forced the doctors to perform an emergency cesarean section. Celeste was barely conscious when they pulled the baby out. She heard the first cry through a haze of drugs and tears. Esme Vale had arrived, a beautiful baby girl with soft features and a strong grip when placed in Celeste's arms. But the joy was hollowed by Dorian's absence. He wasn't there to cut the cord, to hold her hand, to meet their daughter in her first moments. 6 hours after Esme's birth, Dorian finally appeared. He walked into the hospital room with a bouquet of roses and a weak smile. He was clean-shaven, dressed in designer clothes, and oddly refreshed for a man who supposedly had just landed from an overnight flight from Dubai. He cradled the baby and told Celeste how proud he was, how his meeting had run late, how he had tried to get the earliest flight out. But Celeste noticed the small details. His shirt was wrinkled, but not travel wrinkled, and he still wore a club wristband on his right wrist. She smelled perfume, faint but unmistakable, on his collar. Not the kind Celeste ever wore. She didn't say anything. Not yet. She just watched him carefully, memorizing every movement, every inconsistency. The nurses took photos of the new family, but Celeste could barely smile. Her body ached from surgery, but her heart ached more from betrayal. When she was finally alone with her baby, Celeste thought back to all the moments she had tried to believe Dorian's excuses, all the times she defended him to her friends, told herself not to overthink. But now, holding Esme, she felt a new clarity. She wasn't just a wife anymore. She was a mother, and she couldn't allow lies to fester around her child. Back at the mansion days later, things returned to an eerie version of normal. Dorian played the doting father in front of guests and staff, took selfies with the baby for his curated social media posts, and scheduled a photo shoot to be featured in a luxury parenting magazine. But he rarely stayed in the nursery for long. He always had meetings, phone calls, events to attend. Celeste watched him walk out the door each time with a calm she had learned to wear like armor. She had made her decision, but before she acted, she needed answers. Concrete, undeniable truth. That was when she reached out to Royce Kellen, a former homicide detective turned private investigator. She contacted him through a secure line, using a fake name and an encrypted email. She explained her situation carefully, never revealing her real identity at first. Royce agreed to take the case. Within days, they met at a quiet cafe far from Eldersgate, and she handed him everything she had gathered so far. Photos, timestamps, phone logs. Royce promised discretion and results. Celeste believed him. Unlike Dorian, Royce looked her in the eye. As Esme slept peacefully in her crib each night, Celeste would sit by her side, watching the rise and fall of her tiny chest. She had been born into a world of deception, but Celeste swore she would grow up surrounded by truth. She had carried the weight of suspicion through 9 months of pregnancy. Now she would carry the truth forward, for both of them. Every lie Dorian had ever told was about to come undone. Celeste didn't know exactly what she would discover, but she was ready. And whatever she found, she knew one thing for sure. There was no going back. Royce Kellen worked quickly. Within days, he had already started peeling back the layers of Dorian Vale's double life. Using burner accounts, surveillance photos, and data recovery software, he built a timeline that exposed a disturbing pattern of infidelity, deception, and manipulation. Celeste received updates through a secure drive. No phone calls, no messages, just encrypted documents and silent evidence that shattered any remaining illusion of loyalty. The name Tasha Drew appeared. Again, but not as a casual fling. She was a fixture in Dorian's life, deeply embedded in his personal and business affairs. She wasn't just someone he met on business trips. She had been flown to private properties, included in confidential meetings, and even listed as a silent partner in one of his luxury real estate ventures. Royce uncovered financial statements showing wire transfers to her under various aliases, and photographs of them together at a secluded villa in Capri. The most damning image was dated the exact night Celeste went into labor. Dorian had been photographed on a rooftop bar in St. Helena, champagne in hand, arms around Tasha, looking carefree while his wife was preparing to give birth without him. Celeste's hands trembled as she scrolled through the pictures. Her heart didn't just break, it crystallized. The betrayal was far deeper than she imagined. Dorian hadn't made a mistake. He had built a life within a lie, and she had been cast as the background character in a drama she didn't even know she was part of. But there was more. Royce's latest report suggested that Tasha wasn't his only secret. One document showed an apartment leased in downtown Eldersgate under the name Daniel Vex. It was Dorian's handwriting on the lease agreement, but the name was fake. Surveillance footage captured him entering the building with another woman, different from Tasha, on multiple nights throughout the year. Royce tracked down the woman. Her name was Lyra Knox, an aspiring model and socialite who had tagged Dorian in photos under vague captions, careful not to use his name, but unmistakably showing his designer watch or the reflection of his silhouette. Celeste sat alone in her home office, the baby monitor beside her, watching her daughter sleep as she read the final sentence of the report. Subject has maintained at least 3 simultaneous romantic relationships while married. Timeline suggests premeditation and active concealment. The betrayal was systemic, not spontaneous. But Celeste was not broken. She was evolving. For months, she had played the supportive wife. She had smiled for cameras, protected Dorian's reputation, and allowed herself to be cast as the loyal partner. But now, she began to see the power in quiet observation. She, Knew Dorian valued image more than anything. His public perception was his currency. Trusted CEO, family man, visionary. He had spent years building that facade, and she was going to be the one to take it apart, piece by piece. Her next steps had to be precise. She started with her legal team. Without revealing the entire situation, she began drafting custody papers and financial reviews, disguising them as part of their routine estate planning. She opened a private trust for Esme and transferred small, unnoticeable sums into it weekly. Everything was subtle, no sudden movements. Dorian couldn't know what she was preparing. Not yet. She also started saving digital records, screenshots, emails, Royce's files. She kept them in 3 separate locations, one on a secure drive, another on a hidden USB, and one uploaded under a pseudonym to a cloud server with multiple failsafes. If anything happened to her, the world would know the truth about Dorian Vale. Meanwhile, Dorian carried on with his life as though nothing had changed. He hosted charity events at their home. He spoke at international summits. He kissed Celeste on the cheek during interviews, praised her strength as a mother, and talked about their miracle baby to investors. His lies weren't just personal, they were profitable. Every photo of their happy family was worth millions in stock confidence. Celeste smiled in the photos too, holding Esme close. But behind the smile, her mind worked like a strategist. She studied every word Dorian used, every glance he gave the camera. She noted when he left, when he returned, and who he mentioned casually in conversation. She no longer questioned if she should leave. She was simply deciding when and how to do it in a way that would dismantle him. One evening, as Dorian prepared for a business trip to Hong Kong, Celeste handed him his luggage and smiled. He kissed her forehead, told her not to worry, and promised to FaceTime before bedtime. She nodded, kissed his cheek, and whispered a soft goodbye. That night, as his plane took off, Celeste uploaded her final backup of Royce's report and initiated a scheduled message. If she didn't cancel it within 7 days, it would automatically forward the files to major media outlets, government regulators, and board members at Dorian's company. She didn't cry anymore. She didn't doubt her decision. Her daughter deserved a world of truth, not a palace of lies. And now, with every piece in place, Celeste was preparing for the final move. Dorian thought he was untouchable, but he was wrong. Celeste wasn't just walking away. She was about to take the entire empire with her. The morning after Dorian's departure, Celeste walked through the mansion with quiet clarity. Every marble floor tile, every gold-accented painting on the walls, and every chandelier overhead had once felt like a dream. Now it all looked hollow. The house no longer held warmth, just secrets, silence, and carefully curated appearances. She began packing what truly mattered. Not jewelry, not couture, not even the wedding album. Instead, she carefully folded Esme's onesies, blankets, and bottles into a discreet suitcase. She pulled her own documents from the safe, passport, birth certificate, and bank records. Then, with practiced calm, she pulled out a smaller case hidden behind the linen closet wall. Royce had given it to her weeks ago, a hard drive, a burner, phone, and 3 untraceable credit cards in the name of Cara Nolan, her new legal identity, if it ever came to that. Downstairs, the staff moved about unaware. The housekeepers smiled as usual. The private chef prepared Celeste's favorite breakfast, believing nothing had changed. She smiled back, thanking them gently. She wanted no attention, no suspicion. She knew Dorian had people watching everything. Security, guards who answered to him, assistants who reported his every instruction. Celeste had to remain invisible. Later that afternoon, she drove to the law firm that represented Dorian's various corporate interests. Her own lawyer, June Merrick, met her in a hidden side office. It had no signage, no receptionist, just a quiet desk, closed blinds, and a soundproof door. Celeste handed over a flash drive with Royce's full report. June didn't need to read it all immediately. The first 2 pages were enough. She looked up at Celeste, face tight with recognition of the depth of deceit and the magnitude of what this could mean. A scandal involving Dorian would ripple across industries, media, and boardrooms. He wasn't just a wealthy man. He was a brand, a symbol of family-first leadership. June didn't speak much. She simply nodded and began drafting the separation documents. Celeste's request was clear. She wanted sole custody of Esme, a full audit of Dorian's assets, and immediate withdrawal from any joint holdings that could be used to manipulate her. She didn't want to destroy him publicly, yet, but she wanted power, control, and the ability to vanish if needed. June advised her it would be tricky, especially with the press. Celeste had thought of that too. Royce had already prepared a media contingency plan, a slow drip of evidence. Financial fraud, double dealings, photos. Nothing too scandalous at once, but just enough to tarnish Dorian's perfect image if he tried to retaliate. Celeste had the power to erode him, little by little, until there was nothing left but headlines soaked in scandal. When she returned home that evening, Dorian's assistant called to check in. Celeste answered sweetly, reporting that Esme had smiled for the first time that day. No mention of lawyers, no mention of files. She played her part so well that even Dorian texted later to say how lucky he was. She responded with a heart emoji, knowing that at that very moment, Royce was tailing him through the streets of Hong Kong, taking more photos with another unfamiliar woman. That night, Celeste couldn't sleep. She lay beside the crib, watching her daughter's tiny hands stretch upward, eyes fluttering in sleep. She whispered promises to Esme, not of riches or comfort, but of truth, of safety, of never allowing anyone to use them as pawns again. The next few days moved swiftly. June filed the first documents under seal. Royce finalized the off-grid relocation plan. Celeste began quietly informing her closest friends, those who had seen the cracks but never pushed. They were stunned, but loyal. They offered help, shelter, and most of all, silence. The first leak happened 2 days before Dorian's return. It was subtle. A tweet from an anonymous account claiming Dorian had falsified travel reports for tax evasion. The account attached 2 low-resolution images of him with Tasha Drew, time-stamped to the night Celeste gave birth. It spread quickly. A few media blogs picked it up, then the financial sites. Investors started asking questions. Shares in his main company dipped slightly. His PR team scrambled, calling it a smear campaign. Dorian, oblivious to the source, panicked publicly, but mocked the rumors privately. He had no idea the fire had started in his own living room. When he finally walked back through the doors of the mansion, flowers in hand, Celeste greeted him with her usual smile. But everything had changed. Her suitcase was already packed. Her legal papers were filed. Her mind was no longer tethered to hope. Dorian kissed her cheek as always, unaware he had just stepped into the final act of his perfect illusion. Celeste went through the motions, asked about his trip, nodded at his rehearsed replies, and thanked him for the gifts. But before sunrise, she took Esme in her arms, placed a final note on the table beside his untouched coffee mug, and walked out of the house forever. By the time Dorian discovered the note, Celeste was already gone. The empire he thought he controlled was starting to crumble, because the one person he underestimated had taken her pain and turned it into a strategy. And now she held the blueprint for his downfall. By the time the sun rose over the estate, Celeste was already in another city. Her new name, Cara Nolan, was already active in the system. The private charter flight had taken her and baby Esme to a discreet location known only to June and Royce. Far away from cameras, reporters, and Dorian's spies, she found a quiet apartment in a coastal town, nestled between rocky cliffs and thick forest. It wasn't glamorous. The furniture was basic, the neighborhood quiet, but it was safe, and for the first time in years, it was hers. Back in the city, chaos erupted. News agencies picked up the anonymous leaks, turning whispers into headlines. One day, it was financial irregularities. The next, a scandal about Dorian's business ties to shell companies based in tax havens. Then came the grainy images of Dorian in hotel lobbies and rooftop bars, always with women who weren't his wife, always during times he had told the public he was with family. His public relations team worked overtime, issuing denial after denial, calling the reports fabrications. But nothing stuck, and the media kept digging. The name Tasha Drew surfaced more than once, and while Dorian tried to shield her, she disappeared from public view. Her social media accounts were wiped clean within a week. Celeste stayed hidden, but she didn't stay silent. Through June, she issued a private statement to the court outlining the reason for the separation. It wasn't sent to the press. It didn't need to be. Rumors swirled fast enough, and the silence from Celeste only made it worse for Dorian. With every unanswered question, the public began writing its own version of the story. The image of the faithful billionaire husband crumbled. His carefully constructed brand, the one polished through decades of interviews, photo ops, and foundation galas, collapsed under the weight of one truth. Behind the wealth, he was just another man, with too much power and too little conscience. Dorian tried reaching Celeste, dozens of texts, hundreds of calls, all ignored. At first, he assumed she was emotional, hurt, and reacting impulsively. But when he received the official custody notice and realized she'd moved every cent of her personal fortune into accounts he couldn't trace, panic set in. He hired private investigators, but they got nowhere. Royce had erased every trail. Dorian raged behind closed doors, but in public, he played the part of the wounded husband, claiming misunderstandings, begging for forgiveness in vague press conferences. But the court filings said otherwise. They revealed bank transfers to unknown women, luxury properties held in alias names, and hidden paternity suits from years past. Celeste had unearthed everything, and she had receipts. In her new life, Celeste adjusted slowly. Mornings began, with Esme cooing in her bassinet. She took walks by the sea, wrapped in sweaters, her hair tucked into hats to avoid recognition. Locals thought she was just another single mother starting over. She liked it that way. For the first time, she made friends who didn't care about last names, designer bags, or annual galas. They didn't know about the headlines. They didn't care. They only saw her love for her child and her quiet strength. Months passed. Dorian's empire fractured. Stockholders withdrew support. Lawsuits followed, and several of his board members resigned under scrutiny. No official statement from Celeste ever surfaced. She remained a shadow, an untouchable figure no one could blame or discredit. Her silence became a symbol of dignity. Women across the world began speaking out, sharing their own stories of betrayal, using Celeste as inspiration. She had become more than a wife who left. She had become a movement. Meanwhile, Dorian shrank from the spotlight. He was still rich, still powerful, but he was no longer adored. He lost sponsorships, charity partnerships ended. His name, once associated with elegance, was now attached to scandal and shame. He tried suing June for defamation, but the documents were too airtight. Every accusation had backing, every leak had a source, and all paths, in one way or another, led back to his own choices. 1 year later, Celeste stood in a modest courthouse. Esme rested on her hip as the judge signed off on the final custody ruling. Full guardianship was granted to Celeste. Dorian didn't appear in court. He had stopped fighting by then. The last hearing had drained him, both financially and emotionally. He knew there was no victory left. His daughter wouldn't know him as a hero. She would grow up knowing her mother had protected her before she even understood what danger looked like. That night, Celeste lit a small candle in her quiet apartment. She placed it near the window and watched the flame flicker as waves crashed in the distance. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vengeful. She felt free. She no longer carried the weight of someone else's lies. She no longer had to pretend. and in the gentle rhythm of her daughter's breath, in the peace of a life reclaimed, she knew she had already won.